Hello, welcome. Can you guys hear me? Let me know where you're watching from. My name is Naomi Gray. I'm your host and painting adventure guide of this workshop. So in the previous workshop, we started working on the still life of the onion, and today we're gonna have a watch party of reviewing the entire process, including the studio setup and how I get started with a typical painting on small canvas. Okay, well, hello and welcome. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Good. Okay, so in case you haven't met me, my name is Naomi Gray. I live in Washington State, but I'm originally from Tokyo, Japan. And we are having kind of warm winter in Washington State. That's where we live. And we have 12 chickens and 2 ducks free ranging outside, and I love painting nature inspired art, including the wildlife in our backyard as well as our chickens. So before I get started with the painting presentation, I want to quickly go over my painting approach. I have my designated studio space just outside of the main house on the same premise, but I didn't get started with a full-blown studio setup. Several years ago, because of my family reason, I had to drive and travel several hours every other weekend, and I have to carry my entire painting gear, art supplies with me. So I came up with this concept called the Minimalist Oil Painting system, and it includes where to paint with minimum setup, how to paint with simple, repeatable, versatile system, and what to paint every day so that I never run out of painting ideas, including landscape and outdoors, still life setup, finding the reference images, creating the edited version of the painting design. So in my painting adventure studio membership program and blueprint course, we deal with all 3 pillars of the minimalist oil painting method. So I'm going to show you some of the examples in life that what I mean by the minimalist oil painting method. So I'm just going to give you a quick tour of my studio. I already recorded this before, so I'm going to watch this with you. Okay. So here is my tabletop setup example. I have more than one way to paint around my home and around my studio. That's part of my minimalist oil painting setup system. But if you're starting out with a simple setup, this is my most basic recommended setup. Portable painting easel. Okay, so and I have a 6x6-inch canvas mounted on the Gator foam board. You can use any flat board that you can mount it. That way you don't have to worry about getting wet oil paint getting all over your hands and furniture. I just simply put tape on the back of the canvas and mount it on the board. And then you can see I have the tablet device sitting right next to the easel, so I can display the reference image. Sometimes you can play back the painting lessons. And I have this portable palette container. I got this from Amazon, and if you are interested in where to get these supplies, I have a complete set of supply list that you can download. So I will share that with you later. Okay, so now the easel lighting. This is this is a LED light panel with adjustable white balance and brightness. And I also got this from Amazon. And this is attached to the tabletop, so you can set this up anywhere in your small space. Wherever you go, you can just even bring this with you. It runs on battery as well as the AC adapter from the wall. Now I'm gonna show you the second example. So this is a pochade box. It's a French term for the artist painting box. And I can mount this on any tripod for camera. And I'm just showing you one of my shadow box to set up the studio still life. So this is what the inside of the Soho pochade box looks like. Soho is the name of the brand who makes this particular pochade box. And it comes with this extendable panel for storing the brushes. And also, the nice thing about this box is that you can store up to two thin canvas panels and still close the lid. So you can take it anywhere without dealing with the wet canvas. I also have the gray glass palette. It's tempered glass with a neutral gray background, so it's great for judging the mixing color. So inside the palette tray, there is a little storage compartment. Some pochade boxes come with the compartment, and some of them don't, to minimize the thickness of the box. And if you have a large freezer space, this is the palette storage box that I have for storing the mixing palette with fresh paint, and it will slow down the drying time of the paint. So this is 12 inch by 6 inch, and you can put any size of panel canvas mixing palette, small, any size, in 12 by 16 or smaller. So you can see I'm just using the camera mount that comes with this particular tripod, and it fits in the screw hole at the bottom of the pochade box. So here I'm talking about this tempered glass palette that comes with the storage box. The idea is to slow down the air movement around the paint, because the oil paints dry by oxidation. So any method that slows down the movement of air slows down the drying time. So if you don't have a large storage space for your palette box, here is the airtight watercolor palette that I also found on Amazon. It has gasket around the cover, and you can store your fresh paint inside, and last for several weeks. And my color palette is very limited. I just use 3 primary colors plus titanium white. So I'm using permanent rose for the red, cadmium lemon yellow for the yellow, and ultramarine blue for my blue, and titanium white. And you can see that I have large paint tubes. So once you decide which color, which brand and which color of oil paint you want to keep using, I recommend getting large tube. And here's my studio tip: whenever the tube gets smaller, I just stop using the tube and save it for plein air painting or traveling, and I just start using new tube instead of buying small tubes. It's so much more economical and save a lot of money. So with just 4 tubes, you can create and mix all these 40 colors. And I used color mixture to paint these animal portrait. And here I'm describing my brushes. These are all listed in my studio supply list. And here's a little tip about my solvent selections. So I have two sets of solvent, and here is the solvent-free gel from Gambling, and the other. So this one is great for painting impasto effect or small areas, and for large areas, especially on large canvas, I use solvent-free liquid medium. So those are my go-to solvent. But for small studies, like the one that we'll do today, is not something that I use medium for. I never use small medium paint solvent for. I'm sorry. There's a difference between solvent and medium. So medium is something that I use for thinning the paint, and sometimes I can use solvent to do that. But for a small study like the onion still life, I don't use any medium. So let's watch the next video. Okay, so the other day I completed my value study and color study on the same kind of canvas panel. Then now I started gridding the canvas to transfer the design more accurately. For small study like this, I don't always need to use the grid method for drawing, but this is actually the way I get started with my animal portrait. So this painting demo is totally applicable with how you might want to start your animal painting as well. And each artist has their preferred way of starting the painting, and that's probably where we kind of get overwhelmed and never get started with painting. So it's nice to have a simple single method that you can just confidently get started, and this is how I do it. So when I paint still life studies on my own on daily basis, I don't necessarily take photo and do grid drawing, but for my painting lessons and the workshops, I teach how to utilize the grid drawing method to accurately transfer the painting design. And this is one of the best way to train your eye to see the proportion and move your hand while making observation of the model that you're looking at. So it really trains your hand-eye coordination. All right, so you can see my titanium white, cadmium lemon, permanent rose, ultramarine blue, and I mixed these three primary colors to make my custom black. That's what you see here. I also have extra of the dark mixture on the side, but these are share the same pigment. So I mixed my custom black, then I'm mixing the color for the wash. So in the small value study and color studies, I didn't use wash to kill the whiteness of the canvas, but for a full canvas painting project, I prefer using the thin wash of the underpainting so that I can get rid of the whiteness of the canvas. By doing that, it will make it easy for me to judge the color that I'm applying on canvas. And also, I don't have to worry about leaving white spots between brush strokes. And I was looking at my color study, and I chose to use the color of the tabletop because it's echoing everywhere inside the still life shadow box. Okay, so I'm using clean Gamsol to thin this mixture of the tabletop color. Then I'm gonna just use paper towel soaked into the Gamsol to apply this wash. So I'm using the acrylic primed cotton canvas, which is very observant. As soon as I put anything on it, it just observes. So you could do this with acrylic paint, and you can paint with oils if we want to have a completely dry underpainting. But I'm showing you the way to just utilize oil paints starting from the wash and underpainting and the color blocking. So because it's the tabletop color that I'm using for the wash, I'm not so concerned about these uneven spots in the underpainting. Now I'm gonna start creating the value study with this transparent color. And the method is also called grisaille. So here I'm applying the shadow color with the custom black mixed into the underpainting color, which is the tabletop color. And because this is a monochromatic value study, I'm not too concerned about the precise color mixing. I just want to establish the lighting effect on the canvas using the transparent color and adding more darkness for the shadows. I'm using number 4 Bristol flat brush, but because I've been using this brush for a while, the square tip of the Bristol got worn out and it looks more like filbert in teardrop shape. So if you're wondering which brush to get between flat or filbert, you might as well go with flat brush because they will get they'll be rounded up as you use. But if you have budget, you might want to have both flat and filbert. Filbert brushes are great for painting animal portrait because it doesn't leave square brush marks. So I work all the way around canvas, waiting for some dark sections to dry with the initial layer. Then I'll go back there to add more paint. So even though this section is more an alla prima or one setting approach, I'm distributing the drying time by working on different sections of the canvas. And since the right side of the canvas is, let me say this again, because on the still life setup, the light source is on the left side, and as it goes away from the light, which is the right side of the still life stage, it gets darker by going away from the light source. So that's part of the reason I made the gradation of light to dark going from left to right. And on the also right side, there is really the cast shadow of the left shadow box wall that creates this nice deep background on the left. And I'm also recognizing the highlight of the onion bouncing into the tabletop in front of it, the closer to us. That's why we see additional glow on the tabletop. So that's why with all these elements, you see a dynamic shift of lit side and gradually getting darker away from the light source. And this is a kind of nuance that I love staging on the still life setup. It's just like directing a theater. So in this stage, I'm trying not to leave too much hard edges, especially the transition between the tabletop and the back wall, because I want to create more deep space, the illusion of deep space. And whenever you see a sharp edge, or harsh lines, it will make the object come closer to you. So that's how I orchestrate the spatial relationship, by using the language of the edges. Okay. So now I'm mixing the local color. This is the color of the onion, cadmium lemon yellow with a little bit of permanent rose. So here's the fun part. I'm making my orange instead of using the pure orange straight from cadmium orange tube. I make my own orange, and then I'm comparing and contrasting with the color swatch that I already made for the shadow side. All I have to focus is to match my mixing color with the swatch that I already created for the color study. Now I'm making adjustment with brush to create the shadow color. I'm trying to see how dark I can get away with. Okay, so now I'm done with blocking in the shadow color. Now I'm mixing the bright yellow orange on the rich side of the onion. And I added some white and more yellow to make it extra lighter. And now I have an extremely different color between rich side and shadow side. And I'm still using number 4 brush to simply blocking in these color masses. I also painted the stem. Now I'm working on the tabletop. I already had the color of the wash, and I'm just extending that color with additional paint and a little bit of white for more opacity. So whenever I mix colors, I try to mix my blending session on the mixing palette instead of mixing on the canvas, and this is how I avoid creating the muddy colors on the canvas, keeping the clean colors on canvas. Okay, so now the tabletop is blocked in. Now I'm mixing the color for the background wall. Adding more yellow to desaturate the purple. My custom black is basically the desaturated version of very dark purple, and if I want to make it less purple, I just need to add more yellow to desaturate. I'm using vertical brush strokes to avoid the glare on the wall with dark paint. The dark colors on canvas tend to catch more light from the ceiling light, and makes it so shiny and glary. And by using the vertical strokes, you can avoid the glare. And also, the vertical strokes on the canvas suggest that this is the vertical plane, not the same plane as the tabletop, which I paint with mostly the horizontal brush strokes. So I'm just making color corrections. And here is the highlight. I wanted to show you. I use palette knife to just apply the bright color. Now I'm going to mix the halftone between the lit side and shadow side. You can see the color for the lit side and the color for the shadow, and then I mixed them. I added more paint to create more clean orange. Then I'm just placing the paint on the canvas between the light and shadow. I'm using vertical brush strokes to kind of match the texture of the onion and following the contour. If you have any questions, you can type in that live chat and I will do my best to answer. So here is the finished broken section. I'm not trying to blend these color shapes too much in this stage. Okay, so once I have my painting broken in with basic colors, now here is the fun part. I get to start refining my painting. So I'm reviewing my color study and comparing the color shapes. And I'm already noticing some of the colors that need more warmth or more coolness or desaturation. So having these multiple studies in different stages really helps you to evaluate your painting process more objectively. You don't need someone critiquing your painting all the time. You already have a lot of information in hand. So this was 4 days after the initial blocking painting demo, and I left this. I stored this in the box and kept that in the big freezer for during that time. But the paint kind of settled in, and it's already almost right to touch. You could see my fingertip got a little dirty with the paint. That's how much the paint is still wet and how much it's dry. You don't have to store your painting progress in the freezer, but I just want to experiment how wet the canvas will stay so that I can simulate painting wet on wet. But there's already some change happening on canvas, so it's not as slick as alla prima single painting session. So the biggest thing that bothered me in this stage was how saturated, how intense the background purple looks like. I wanted to be more like neutral gray brown because that was the color of the craft paper. Basically, I customized the colors of the background wall and tabletop with the craft paper that I had in my studio. So if you want to create your still life that you love to paint, you don't have to copy mine. You can just create your own shadow box with different color of paper or fabric, and you can create your personalized still life stage. I'm still using number 4 flat, Bristol flat. So I always start out with small testing section. See if I really want to commit with this color. So I love mixing everything on the palette, but I always want to test it on canvas. And if I need to make adjustment, I will remix that on the palette, not on the canvas. I'm just demonstrating how the ceiling light can cause the glare on your wet canvas by changing the brush stroke directions. So I'm sticking with the vertical brush direction as much as I can. It doesn't always have to be that way, but just because the background color is so dark, I'm doing my best to minimize the glare in the background. So this is the light color of the onion. I still have the mixing palette left over from the other session, stored in that plastic box for the palette. And the palette is still wet, so I can just add more paint to it. And even if it's even if your palette get dry, you can use that as your color example to keep mixing the same color, to reproduce the same color. So you don't necessarily have to clean up your entire palette just because you run out of time before painting is finished. Okay, so I painted over that the palette knife highlight. So I'm trying to create the halo effect around the lit side of the still life object. This halo effect is one way to create more drama in the still life painting, and it usually happens just on the lit side of the object, not around the shadow side of the object. I don't always do this, but I just wanted to say what it would look like with this onion study. So one thing I'm noticing is that because I'm using a cheap cotton canvas mounted on cardboard, I can see the texture of the canvas when I apply the light color, extremely light color on top of extremely dark background. And if this is for the art show or competition, I would use a better painting surface like linen canvas with oil prime, and the fabric will be more the fabric has more the smaller texture, so that the fabric pattern doesn't show through this paint application. It's kind of bothers me. And actually, some still life artists prefer painting on smooth hardboard. Like Masonite board primed with gesso. So I keep referring back to my value study and color study. I'm cleaning up the edges with thicker paint, especially for the lid side. You can see I'm using my palette knife to get rid of the excess paint from the blister, and I'm just recycling the paint instead of wiping away in the paper towel, because this color is still clean. And I'm just using small and short series of small brush strokes to complete the organic lines instead of a single continuous brush stroke. This can create even more painterly effect. For this one, I'm using number 2 filbert brush, and because I just touched the wet background color along the edge of the onion shape, I'm wiping my brush with paper towel after each stroke. So this color is basically the orange made of yellow and red with some white, but it has a little bit of custom gray in it, so it's not completely pure orange of yellow and red. Now I'm moving into the shadow side. I'm adding more permanent rose into it to create more warmth. So as you can see, I spend a lot of time mixing color on palette, but this is how I can create more harmonious color. Okay, so I've started experimenting with bigger brush. This is number 6 flat. So if I'm doing this again, if I'm doing this onion study again, I think I would start out with number 6 brush instead of 4 or 2 until I have to get into small and tight sections for detail. And I will switch to smaller brush like number 2 and detail brush. So again, I'm using the palette knife to apply this brightest highlight, because the surrounding color of the onion is very wet, and if I try to put the highlight with brush, it will just lift off what's underneath, and it doesn't have much impact. So I just use palette knife to just place the highlight color. Now I started refining and blending the color blocks by mixing the half color, half tone of those two different colors instead of blending them with brush on canvas. Again, there's no right or wrong about how you mix or how you blend different colors, but this is the approach that I've been enjoying these days for more painterly painting finish. So I just keep refining the shadow color with more variation of reddish orange or cool yellow. As long as the value is the same, you can play with different colors, different hue. So I'm softening the edge of the shadow side and adding some reflected light bouncing off the tabletop. Now I'm re-enhancing the cast shadow with the dark color. I'm softening the edge of the cast shadow that is away from the object. And you can see how blurry and obscured the boundary between the background wall and the tabletop to create the illusion of the depths. And here I'm working on the stem of the onion, starting out with the shadow color. And I add the highlight on top of it. Still using number 2 filbert. Now here I'm starting to carve out the outside edge of the onion with the background color. So at this point, I already lost the pencil drawing of the onion, and I keep referencing back and forth to the reference photos or the still life model that if I have that in front of me. But if you don't have the original setup, then having the photo of your reference, whether it's landscape or still life or animal portrait, it will really help to get more information. But by doing the color study on a small scale, I already know what color, what the base color is, for each color block, and if I lose it, I can just recreate the color swatch on the canvas, on the palette. So I'm talking about the reflected light bouncing off from the highlight of the onion. You see how much the paint is building up on the tabletop area. And I like leaving visible brush marks. And some artists don't like leaving brush marks and use a fan brush to get rid of it. It's a totally personal choice. And let's watch the last segment of the painting demo. So from here, like everything is like icing on the cake, or the value structure is solid, the size and the placement of the onion is still good. So everything I do from here is just spicing up my painting, including more bold brush stroke or brush mark, just a sprinkle of bold brush work. I'm still using number 6, and I using darker version to create more vignette, because I'm thinking of carving the name, my signature, in this upper lower left corner of the canvas, and I want that to be a little bit darker. So I'm enhancing the vignette effect for the entire canvas right now by adding slightly darker version of the local color. And that will create the nice vignette effect that brings viewers in attention to the center of the painting. And that's the style I like for my portrait. So this is a portrait of the onion. So I'm intentionally softening and losing some of the edges. So this is a kind of the stylizing portion of my painting. That gives my, this is part of my personal voice in painting, if you will. And because I love this warm glow in the shadow part where the reflected light of the tabletop is showing, I'm adding more intense warm red inside this color shape without changing the value structure too much. So it takes a lot of observation and thinking. Just like trying to target the bull's eye. I don't want to warm up everywhere in the shadow section, but I'm just carefully selecting where to place this warm color without changing the value relationship. That's the key for creating the impressionistic painting in my way. I keep wiping the brushes so that I don't contaminate the color on the canvas. So if you look at the reference photo, you can see a little bit of reflected light bouncing off the bright stem of the onion. That's what I'm enhancing. So I get to ask from many of my students how I know, or how you know when the painting is done. First of all, if you are just getting started with oils, the initial blocking stage that we saw in the part 1 with a simple color blocking without blending, that's the first step that you want to be good at, you want to become more comfortable with. So if we are doing small studies like this, that's as far as you want to get. Then do many of them, many of the blocking start. Then when you have more time, you can start adding more refinement, including more halftone, more detail, more texture. And if you feel like you overworked, then maybe you can just use simple brush strokes to block in that overworked section again and add a few more fresh brush strokes there. Just like how I did with the onion highlight. I wasn't afraid of just painting over, starting out from the blank slate and adding the thick bold paint mark with palette knife. In that case, it can be with the brush. So right now I'm realizing that the brush I'm using for the stem is really overwhelmingly big. So you see how loose the paint application is at this point? Because first of all, I'm using big brushes, which makes me feel really uncomfortable. And that's probably where you want to get started with. Just stick with the big brushes. For number 6 brush like this, you might want to just do many of the broken studies with number 4 and number 6. And if you need to use small brush, then that's when you can switch to small brush. And for this study section, I'm just using the hog hair Bristol brushes, which is very hard, stiff, natural hair brushes. You can also use synthetic brush that mimics the Bristol brush, but hog hair brush is the traditional choice for the initial blocking stage that's favored by most oil painters. Because you can really push and move the paint with the stiff brush. So now I am using number 2 brush to create the suggestion of the onion texture between the color shapes, like between the half tone and the shadow, between half tone and highlight. And that's where you can suggest the texture instead of drawing the stripe everywhere. I'm simplifying my supplies, my setup, but I'm also simplifying my painting design too. So here I'm using a detailed brush. This is a synthetic round brush. This one is called number 4 round brush, but you can use any small round brushes. Doesn't have to be necessarily have to be round, but I'm using this round brush that I got from Amazon as well. Pay attention to how I'm loading the paint on this detail brush and how I'm applying the paint. I'm keeping the brush very flat against the canvas so that I can deposit and leave the paint on the canvas instead of lifting off the paint. In case you're wondering all my painting supplies, you can get that from my studio setup guide. There's a link in the description below this video. So for the lid side, I wanna create a bold brush marks. So that's why I remix the same color on the palette, and I will load ton of the paint on the brush and paint that on the top of the painting. So my brush marks look louder where I wanna call more attention and keep the brush marks less noticeable and keep the paint thin in the shadows and the areas that I don't want to call too much attention to. I also change the sharpness or hardness of the edges between colors. So now here is the fun part. I'm trying to sign my name, and I'm experimenting with the lightness and darkness of the ground, the surrounding color, because I'm trying to carve my name, hoping that this paint is still soft enough that I can carve out the name with the back end of my brush handle. And I know that the original layer of this painting is already settled in, and I won't be able to come all the way to the bright canvas of bright white of the original surface of the canvas. So I'm bracing my hands on the tabletop and part of the easel to stabilize my hand, and I'm going to carve. I have so many brushes that has different size of the handle tip, so I'm choosing. Takes a lot of time, but the hardest part is done. The painting is done with the variation of the values, edges, and even different types of brushwork. It has a lot of fun elements in this painting, and carving the name on the canvas is the best part. So I'm experimenting. This looks like a little too much, so I'm I'm brushing off with the darker background color, reloading the paint. I'm going to cover it again. So I just keep redoing this whole thing, even for signing my name, until I am satisfied. And this is another thing I love about oil painting. It's just forgiving. Like, my signature didn't look good at the beginning, then I can just scrape it off and wipe it again. And that's how you can create the fresh look on your painting. Nothing is written in the stone. So are you curious how you get to the point where you can start painting a lovely oil painting like this? Here is the roadmap that I described for my student. So this is called the Painting Adventure Flight Path. It's a roadmap for aspiring oil painters to get started and start creating the paintings that we love. So everybody starts out from the curator stage in step 1, that we start setting up our basic studio space. Now you saw how simple my studio setup was in two different versions, tabletop and the portable version with pochade box. Then you're gonna start using those basic supplies and setup to start creating the value studies and color study. That's the step 2, the sculpture stage. Then once you understand how things work with oil painting tools and studio system, you will learn the step-by-step painting process so that you can confidently start and complete a painting. And this is what I teach in the painting course called the Painting Adventure Blueprint course, which is coming soon. Then once you learn the fundamentals of the oil painting, including the drawing, value study, color mixing, color theory, and the different brush work, then you start creating your own reference images or still life models and start experimenting with different composition using everything you learn from the blueprint course, including how to sketch, how to design your compelling painting that you'll be proud of. Then finally, you become the creator. That's where you start painting the subject that you love to paint and express yourself and share that with the world. So the Painting Adventure Studio that you might have heard of covers all of these 5 stages in the artistic journey for oil painters. And today, we just quickly preview the first 3 steps, including the studio setup, how to get started with painting, and how the painting comes to life. And the blueprint course covers all these 3 steps in short, intense period of time, step by step. And what I'm doing in this spring, I do this only once in a year. I'll be hosting a blueprint course with live cohort. So this is a 12-month program, but the live cohort will last for only 6 weeks, and I will be teaching the lessons step by step each week. We're gonna start our kickoff during this month, and from the last day of the 6-week course, you'll have the whole year of the course access, including all the references and bonuses. So if you want to learn more about it, you can go to naomigray.studio/blueprint. It's also the fastest way to learn the basics of painting and drawing without overwhelm. And the best thing about this live cohort is that I'll be checking on you every week if you have any questions, if you have any hiccups with your drawing and painting project. I'm here to guide you through that so that you don't have to feel alone and you don't have to feel stuck trying to solve it by yourself. Because painting can be very lonely activity unless you have other friends and mentor that you can talk to. And this live cohort is the best of all the good things combined. So if you have any question, I am here to answer. Here is the link to learn more about my course. And the still life is the best way to practice oil painting in general, especially if you are interested in learning to paint animals like I do. Coming up with painting ideas for animal portrait takes a lot of time, and creating the reference images for animal portrait is not easy, but still life is a lot simpler and more durable. And that's exactly how you can get more brush mileage and practice your brush work. You train your eye to see like an artist, learn to mix the color and create and paint with clean colors on the canvas. So some people told me that they don't want to paint still life because it's boring, and any practice, including practicing the piano scale or guitar scale, can be boring if, especially if you don't do it at all. So when you don't have time to work on a full-blown project of animal portrait, you can still keep practicing your oil painting skills with a simple still life. And I hope you join my program and keep painting with me. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I am looking forward to seeing you inside the program.